Welcome to Stand By Us 2023, our annual event exploring the intersections of bi+ identity. However you identify, bisexual, pansexual, LGBTQIA+, or no label at all, we are delighted to have you join us.
We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands that you are all coming from today, and we wish to pay our respects to elders past and present, and welcome any First Nations people who are joining us.
Stand By Us is brought to you by a fabulous group of volunteers at Bi+ Collective Australia. Come and visit our website, bicollectiveaustralia.com. Here you will find information about our program of events for this year, our code of ethics, and the ways that we can keep each other safe while attending. Please take a moment to have a look.
We're committed to bringing you up-to-date themes, topics and issues that concern people who are bi+ and our allies. If you're returning to us this year, welcome back. We're excited to connect with you again. And if you're attending for the first time, welcome, and please feel free to join as many events as you wish.
Wherever you're coming from today, welcome, and please enjoy our 3 full days of online and in-person events. These events all explore and celebrate the many vibrant ways bi+ people live, work, play, and connect.
From all of us, Bi+ Collective Australia, happy Bi Visibility Day! And please, enjoy Stand By Us 2023.
Hello everyone, welcome. Let's give a bit of a round of applause for the vibe of the room. Thanks. So welcome you all to RMIT campus today in a lovely job shop that we're lucky to use. And just want to introduce myself. My name is Matt Lewis, pronouns are he, him. I'm the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity and Access lead at RMIT, so all things D&I but staff related. I have the lovely Cash behind us who's in the students team, similar role, but has really played a key part in setting this event up with the lovely folk from the Melbourne Bisexual Network as well. Before we kick off, just want to pay my respects, so acknowledge the Boiwurrung and Woiwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nation, on whose unceded lands we conduct the business of the university. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land, and respecting the elders past, present and emerging in the room. And encourage you all to, get into that democratic process in a couple of weeks' time. It's very close, so very exciting stuff. Bit of housekeeping. Toilets, all gender toilets are just out this door, slightly to your right and then left. We've got drinks and refreshments over here, and there'll also be food and stuff coming at 7 o'clock. So we're just really excited to have you here tonight. We're really keen to see this panel and this research launch and want to welcome you all. And Gabi, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks very much, Matt, and welcome everyone to our event. We're really excited to have you here. I'm going to start by speaking to this quote from Robin Oakes. I call myself bisexual because I acknowledge that I have in myself the potential to be attracted romantically and or sexually to people of more than one gender. Not necessarily at the same time, not necessarily in the same way, and not necessarily to the same degree. This quote is a really foundational tenet of the Bi+ community. It really captures the spirit of who we are, and the different ways that you can identify and still be part of this lovely umbrella community. My name is Gabi. My pronouns are she and her. I'm the acting president at the moment of the Melbourne Bisexual Network, which is the organisation that is hosting the event tonight alongside RMIT. And we welcome you all here today and thank you all for attending, whether you're in person or joining us online. The Melbourne Bisexual Network, or MBN as it's more affectionately known, is a Bi+-led community organisation of volunteers. We're committed to improving the health, well-being and safety of Bi+ Victorians, and we do that through education, advocacy and community building with a focus on mental health. Over the last year and a half or so, we've been really putting our energies behind two major research projects, the culmination of which you're seeing here tonight in the form of two reports. The first one is ethical research guidelines for to do with BI+ research, which is really a seminal document, the first of its kind, and we hope is going to make really be a really valuable resource to BI+ research in the future. And the second document is about intimate partner violence, and in particular how it impacts on BI+ women. So the need for that really goes unsaid, but our wonderful speakers later tonight are going to go into more detail on why these reports are so important and the impact that they're going to have on our communities. Again, I think it's so wonderful to see all of your faces here in person, those of you who could make it and those in our virtual space as well. I don't think it can be understated the importance of having BI+ specific spaces and gathering in a community space that is for our community. So often we're the invisible people in the room in broader queer spaces. Or even in mainstream spaces. And I think this Bi Visibility Week, it's so important that we acknowledge each other, hold each other close, and be grateful that we are a big, vibrant community and we're making waves. Without any further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, the lovely Penny McKay, whose pronouns are she and they. Penny is an incredible individual and their efforts have really contributed to throwing this event together tonight. Penny is a LGBTQ+ inclusion advisor on best practices within health and wellbeing service delivery. She's a speaker and trauma-informed movement advocate. Penny has a background in nursing, youth services, family violence, disaster recovery, and digital mental health. They are passionate about achieving access, equity, and equality for underserved communities through trauma-informed, human-centred approaches. Without any further ado, please make Penny welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm not sure how you got your hands on that bio, Gabi, but that's okay. Welcome, everyone, and thank you, Matt, for your welcome and acknowledgement of country, and Gabi for your lovely intro as well. Really, we just want to thank everybody involved in making this happen and bringing it all together. Obviously, this project would not be possible without the support of the Department of Families, Fairness and Housing, our friends at the Trobe, Safe and Equal, Berry Street, and of course our hosts RMIT, Matt and Cash today, obviously Melbourne Bisexual Network, all our members, all our community that have supported us as well. And of course, acknowledging that there are many BI+ people in the room and online and our allies, and all of us have unique and diverse experiences. Really, we built these reports to honour those experiences, and particularly to honour victims, survivors, and those lost to violence. So it's important, I guess, that we do a content warning about some of the things that we will discuss this evening. We want to hold space for each other, and we're going to have some time after the panel concludes to hold space for each other. But please do also link in with your own supports. Of course, wonderful friends at Switchboard and Q Life as well have some really beautiful resources for community and by community too. So yeah, thank you. Without equipping researchers, service providers and community members with these essential tools, we will struggle to make progress against the many barriers that our BI+ community face. We know that these barriers see the largest component of our sexuality and gender diverse community fare the worst across all health and wellbeing metrics. This is due to the erasure of our BI+ identities and the impact of repeated stigma, discrimination, and the pressure of having to repeatedly come out over and over, both when seeking support and possibly within all facets of our lives. We, of course, acknowledge that BI+ people have always existed everywhere, and that the impacts of colonisation include erasure of First Nations genders and sexualities that existed long before colonial imposition of gender and sexuality binaries. We also acknowledge that bi+ people may navigate their diverse sexuality alongside diverse intersectional identities also. Our hope is that this work serves as a guide for all of community, including those who are at the start of their bi+ inclusive journey. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to announce and introduce Juniper Muller, who uses they and she pronouns. Juniper is a queer, non-binary psychologist specialising in gender, sex and sexuality. She is a passionate client activist and advocate and practices from an anti-oppressive, trauma-informed and intersectional feminist framework. All the good stuff. Juniper refuses to pick just one thing ever, very bisexual, and dabbles in everything instead. They're also a founding member of Melbourne Bisexual Network and a proud bisexual who's contributed to both the research guidelines and our IPV report. Please make Juniper welcome.
Thank you so much, Penny. It's so wonderful to be here. And oh my gosh, I wish I could be there in person, but unfortunately, the extremely biphobic virus I picked up meant that I'm a little bit sick today. And so I'm zooming in to you from my home, but I've got this incredible bisexual sky behind me. Anyway, the research report, by the way, I am incredibly proud to present this research set of guidelines for you. This is actually one of my little dreams that I had when I was part of the founding of Melbourne Bi Network. Getting towards a kind of bi-inclusive practice for researchers was something that I thought was really crucial, because I was seeing actually lots of research being done about bi+ people and queer folks in general that was of really poor quality, unfortunately. Whether it was actually reproducing myths for bi+ people, just forgetting to include us at all, or describing research outcomes in such a way that I, as someone who is interested as an activist and an advocate, couldn't actually get the data out of these different, wonderful scientific findings that would help us in our advocacy to be able to pinpoint what's actually happening for bi+ people. We got to do it, and I got to do it in collaboration with some really wonderful bi+ researchers and allies, students. I want to make really special mention of Rebecca Cavara, who I think may be in the audience there. I'm not sure, should definitely stand up and have a wave if you are. I also can't hear the audience. I don't know if you're able to put the microphone on the audience, Matt. But yeah, look, Rebecca did an incredible job doing the writing up of our various workshops with the Bi+ Brains Trust, which I gathered all of my favourite researchers from around the traps, different universities, different people, especially from ARCSHS, the Australian Research Centre for Sexual Health. I always forget the last S. Anyway, ARCSHS, look them up. And also Natalie Amos from La Trobe as well, who's a wonderful researcher there. And together we really pulled together these guidelines using lots of consultation, lots of development of what would be a really practical document for researchers to use to improve the quality of their research, so that that was useful both for them to produce better quality research overall, but also for community, because what good is research that is only good for researchers if it doesn't actually translate to improvements and benefits for the Bi+ community itself? And so at every single stage, this document was developed with Bi+ community in mind and with lots of consultation. Let me grab a copy here. Oh, my camera's going to fail. Here we go. You can see it in my hot little hands, and I'm so happy that we got to have Briar Rolfe, a local illustrator and artist and graphic designer, put together such an incredibly beautiful document. So transported this very clunky, pretty ugly looking long text document into the just gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous document that you can see now. And I think we've got a bunch of hard copies there, all things going to plan. Gabi, thanks for bringing them in, and so you can take home a copy tonight. There is also the copy online, which if you go to the MBN website and scroll down a little bit, one of the main first posts is going to be one that'll send you to the research reports. One of the things actually that might be interesting with the illustrations, just to kind of like bring in what are the visuals, what do we look like, is that with some of the illustrations, we talked about, well, what does a bisexual look like? What do we look like? And the answer is we look like a whole lot of different things. But I suppose we really wanted to capture some of what's sort of been emergent in the last kind of 5 to 10 years of bi culture. Things like cuffed jeans or different kind of queer flagging things, whatever your gender is. I grabbed a few of the photos from some of our Bi Plus picnics and our events in the last couple of years, sent them to Briar to say, hey, here's what our actual community looks like. These things are really important to me because it was kind of putting us into the research, not just a kind of cold, clinical, dead, quantitative set of numbers on a page, but rather inviting researchers in to think about us in our completeness and in our humanity. I'm a psychologist. I actually started in research at the Children's Hospital and Murdoch Children's Research Institute. I think back to like, well, how was I treating sexuality back then when I was doing that kind of research? How was I thinking about recruitment? How was I thinking about being sensitive to how people experience their sexuality, maybe how they experience their sexuality over time as well? And so there's plenty in the, by the way, report or set of guidelines to talk about different ways of understanding attraction, sexuality, labels, behaviors, and how these different things might kind of interact, might kind of overlap, but also might diverge and have important distinctions, which might really change the way in which you conduct your research, but also how you interpret the outcomes or how you choose to present that information to your peers, to your colleagues, to the general public. How do you translate it into practice and policy? So I think I'm running out of time for my little bit, but oh my gosh, I don't know how to thank all of the people involved in this project enough. It is something that I'm really proud of. And I'm also really excited to, next time we have someone email MBN or get in contact with us to say, hey, I'm a young researcher. I'm interested in researching bi people or queer people in general or researching about sexuality, that we can just say, here's the report. Here's the guidelines. Just do everything in here and you'll probably be right. Continue to consult with us for sure. But like, here is something that we can give to you. So it's all there on a silver platter. The main research, and actually there have been some different Bi Plus research guidelines before this one that we're, drawing on the backs of, but there hasn't been anything in like 10 years. And hey, lots changed in 10 years. And that set of research guidelines, which we've referenced in there, was so wonderful and pitched at kind of a particular kind of researcher. This one we wanted to make really easy to use, really practical to use, a lot of step-by-step instructions in some cases, as well as questions to ponder and reflect on to develop a more nuanced understanding of bisexuality and multigender attraction in general. But yeah, I wanted to thank all of the event organisers, thank my colleagues and the rest of the committee. This might be one of the last kind of big events that I'm involved in for MBN. So I feel so much gratitude for everyone's work and to have been a part of it, and excited for the rest of tonight. But yeah, I'll pass back onto the group.
Thank you so much, Juniper. We love you. We're sad that we may not have as much of you around, but also excited for all of your future work as well. I'm not sure where to look because I'm kind of looking at you behind me, but also at the camera. So anyway, but yeah, you know, as Juniper said, it's about, I guess, removing barriers to knowledge and trying to empower practitioners or folks who are already working and doing this work who may want to, you know, improve their practice and or early career researchers as well. So, you know, trying to keep that accessibility in mind has been really important. And I think that that's really obvious when you read through as well, which is amazing. Awesome. I think we're somehow actually running on time, which is not very bisexual of us, but that's okay. I would absolutely love to introduce the wonderful Ruby Mountford, who many of you may know. Ruby uses they, them pronouns and is a non-binary, disabled, bisexual, and an award-winning activist and advocate, breaking down walls in queer and disability spaces. Ruby was a founding member of Melbourne Bisexual Network and pioneered Joy Media's first Bisexual Plus program and podcast, Triple Bypass. I mean, come on. They have developed and coordinated LGBTQIA and disability inclusion projects in community healthcare services, as well as providing consultation on intersectional inclusion with various NGOs, committees, and government working groups. They're also a proud bisexual who's contributed to both the research guidelines and the IPV report. Please welcome our Ruby.
Thank you. Now, the advantage of being here first is that I can see that there's a light. So am I in the light now? Am I in the light? Great. I am anxious but also desire all of your attention. It's a killer combination. I'm putting a timer on. I have a very poor sense of passing. I'm like a lot of bisexual people, very neurodivergent. And so this will hopefully keep me on track. Before I begin, I just want to acknowledge again that we are here on Wurundjeri country. Pay my respects to elders past and present and to their custodianship of the lands and the waters for over 60,000 years as the oldest living culture. And always was, always will be, damn straight. Stand by. I don't know. Off to I'm here to talk about the second report. Now, there was only 5 draft copies that were out. Who's got one? Who's got a copy of the Intimate Partner Violence Report? 1, 2, 3. All right, there's 2 more. Who's got? I know it's out there. These are drafts. I mentioned that just because please don't take it out of the room just yet. But these came about of Juniper and I started working on this report in July last year. And so it's incredibly exciting to have them out. This came about due to some funding from the Victorian government, which has been an excellent supporter of Melbourne Bisexual Network and the LGBTIQA+ organisations in this state. When we had to choose some priorities to focus on with 25 grand and originally 4 months, we said, that's ridiculous. We'll do it in 6. We didn't. We did it in 18, you know. But basically, we thought the big factors that came up was social connection. So we held events at RMIT, we held some trivia, some panels. People liked the trivia more, which was good feedback for us. But we also did some articles with ARCSHS magazine. Did anyone read those online? We ran a few last year, as well as a very glorious photo shoot just for the visibility. And we also worked on the research guidelines and this report. It's tricky. One of the things I feel coming into bisexual advocacy is the importance of talking about bisexual celebration and pride and not focusing always on the things that can be really difficult for us. But the fact is, as I found out while doing the triple bypass, BI+ people face incredibly high rates of intimate partner violence. And that was something that felt so disconnected from the social narratives I was hearing around me. And as we found out in this research, from the way that we talk about sexual violence and gender-based violence in this country and internationally. And so I think this report was done through, we held a workshop with Berry Street to discuss with caseworkers and people who manage the people who are in the middle of leaving family violence or helping them identify it. We did a workshop with them, which was recorded. We also did surveys. We did a workshop with Safe and Equal, which does primary prevention, which is looking at the factors that lead to violence. I'm saying this because I did not know what primary prevention was, just to be clear. You might know, you might already be all over that. But we also did 2 interviews with people with lived experience as bisexual people of intimate partner violence, both of their experiences in seeking help and their experiences of the justice system. And finally, we have recommendations on ways that we can improve this. Sorry, I'm like a rabbit. I'll just kind of jump around. I think what we found was that it enforced a lot of what we, I think, had talked about colloquially in our communities, that bi+ women are highly fetishized, bi+ men are seen as gay and potentially dangerous insofar as vectors, and that all of us are seen as confused and potentially a little promiscuous. I say a little, I'm understating. The big stereotypes we found was that basically everyone can name a bisexual stereotype, even if they don't think we exist. And that somehow people are able to hold these 2 realities at the same time, that we can both be confused, cheating, liars who don't exist. Which is honestly, it's impressive when you think about it. The human mind contains multitudes. But what we found was that often in intimate partner violence services, there are a lot of people who are bi+ with lived experience who are bringing their knowledge without having necessarily thought of how it would fit in the existing frameworks that we use to understand violence. We recognise through changing the story in our watch that gender-based stereotypes are a massive primary driver, I think is the language, for intimate partner violence and for gender-based violence. And when we look at the stereotypes around bisexual femininity, we see there a massive example of gender-based stereotyping. The idea that our bisexuality is consumable, that it is an indication. And as we talked about this report to other people who are interested in hearing about it, as we talked about these stereotypes, all of us started to be like, oh, that's exactly like what happened to me. Often that sense of our understanding of relationships is often so based on the gender of the person that we're seen with. And most bi+ people according to the research, though I think it's changing, will not be in relationships that are necessarily immediately identifiable as a queer relationship. One of the reasons why, particularly here in NUM, we've got some safety, we really push it with the outfits. But what we found was that in mainstream services, if someone approached and it was someone who was identified as a woman and was in a relationship with a man, the idea that that person might be queer wasn't something that they had the room to they had time or had prompts to bring up, or would consider the way that could impact on the violence that person was experiencing in the relationship. This is a big issue because an earlier study by Julia Shaw in Australia about bisexual people did find that bi+ women in relationships with men were much less likely to be out, and therefore much less likely to go to a queer service. So they're much more likely to go to a Hi, I'm the problem, it's me. Now I can see the faces. Hi, Amber. And this report was also written by the president of Sydney Bisexual Network. Amber. Hi. So it was 2 organisations, 1 report, 2 surveys, 2 workshops, a lot of transcribing, and a lot of Juniper and I having very frantic Zoom calls to make sure we had all gotten across all the meetings we were in. It took a long time, but it is so exciting because this is a world first. We have not seen any resources that have been able to help staff know what to do, because the people who work in those places want to help the people in these situations. We all want to be in spaces where we know how the language we can do to help put the words around our experiences that make them real and make them count and give us ownership over them so they don't have ownership over us. And so I would also like to thank Juniper for the incredible amount of time that they put into this with me, and to Berry Street, Safe and Equal, and the Department of Families, Fairness and Housing. I think they changed their name, and I think that's it. And all the folks at MBN who did deal with me coming into meetings quite frantically, being like, can anyone look at this data? I can't, my eyes are blurring now. But finally, we're looking forward to finalising this. We'll be talking about it again at the LGBTIQ Women's Health Conference on the 22nd, 24th, 2 away, it's not bad. But and also this is my final project with MBN. And I mentioned that just very briefly because what a way to go out, because these are really cool reports. Briar did an amazing job there. Graphic novel, Get Your Story Straight's coming out in 2025 about being a young trans person in the church during the postal survey in Australia. It's amazing, it's very funny. I get to see all the thumb pics on their Twitter, X, whatever. And go check them out, they're brilliant. But also, please get involved with MBN. The report will be hosted at melbournebisexualnetwork.com. and it will be updated once we've finalised our report. But if you have the copy, please pass them around. And thank you all so much for coming out, for being visible, and for hearing us today. Thank you.
Yay! Thank you so much, Ruby. And it was such a joy to be involved in the IPV report and all of your beautiful work as well. And we already miss you so much, and we're so proud of you and all of your tireless tenacity. Is there another T word? I don't know. Yeah, in pushing forward fearlessly in your advocacy. So we love and appreciate you so much. And I'm going to invite our panelists to come up and maybe get their lapel microphones with the help of our lovely AV team. We have 2 panelists joining online as well. So it's going to be fun, everyone, I promise. And just while we're sorting that out, I was reflecting on what Ruby mentioned before regarding health services and access and people's desire to do better. In Private Lives 3, we found that particularly for BI+ folks, they were more likely to want to go to an LGBTQ+ explicitly inclusive service, but we also saw that that's not necessarily available to them. They're more likely to go to mainstream services, but they would actually prefer to go to explicitly inclusive ones. So there's a lot of capacity building that we can do within our health and wellbeing sector and beyond as advocates and BI+ folks as well. I think I've successfully filled in that gap, so I'm going to sit down now. And we're going to start actually by introducing lovely Amber Loomis, who is a fantastic non-binary angel who also supported our work in this report. I might hand over to you, Amber, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks heaps, Penny. Hello, everyone. I'm Amber. I want to acknowledge that I'm joining you from the lands of the Wadamadagal clan of the Darug Nation, and as has been said many times tonight, and I just want to reiterate that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I'm an organizer with Sydney BI+ Network. I've got a background in community organizing, community-led research, advocacy, and many, many years of domestic, family, and sexual violence prevention and response. This is really a tremendous honor to be here. It's so exciting to be in this space with you all. Although I'm virtual, I still feel connected and close to you all, and excited to really remark on the release of these fantastic reports. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Amber. Yeah, greatly appreciate your input, and it's lovely to have collaboration with Sydney BiPlus Network, especially considering our rivalry between Melbourne and Sydney, but not when it comes to buying things. And I'd also love to introduce our wonderful Jayde as well. Thank you so much for joining us, Jayde. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me, everyone. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands we're coming from today, and also as well recognise the continuous history of BiPlus cultures and our lived experiences, but certainly the advocates have led the way. I think it's kind of, sometimes we're always looking forward around what's next, what we can do to support our communities, but there's an incredible amount of work that's been put in already to date. So for those in the room or those online who've put in that massive amount of effort, thank you. In terms of who I am, my pronouns are they and she. I'm a genderqueer BiPlus person. I'm the co-chair of the Victorian Government's LGBTIQ+ task force, and I also lead national programs around diversity, equity, inclusion and social impact, both in sport as well as the higher education sector. So first and foremost though, and the lens I'll be mostly speaking to today is around my lived and living experience as a BiPlus person who is in a straight presenting relationship with a little human, and as in I'm married and have a little human, not married to my 2-year-old. That would be a bit weird. But yeah, you know, first and foremost want to kind of come from that lens, as well as the co-chair hat as well. So thanks again. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Jayde. Awesome. Well, we might kick off and we might discuss, first of all, the current state of play. So interested to hear from our panelists, you know, what is the current state of play with BiPlus inclusion within mainstream services, focusing on health and wellbeing? And Ruby, I might throw to you first.
Yeah, I didn't mention I worked as an LGBTIQ inclusion advisor in health, so I can speak to this a little bit. I think we are seeing a very rapid period of change when it comes to people becoming aware of the gaps in their knowledge and the need to upskill. And of course, at the early stages, that does tend to mean that things are flattened a little, insofar as people's understanding of sexual orientation. What I have also found is that it still can be, people can have had all kinds of queer experiences and still be very sure that they're not queer enough, and that happens no matter how much training they get, that they still be like, well, that's not me. I had and I think when it comes to inclusion, at the moment, the focus has been a lot on still the letters kind of being a big group, you know, like an LGBTIQA+ person. Maybe you could find a way to embody every single letter, but it'd be pretty exhausting. So I think, I don't want water.
We can circle back. Yeah.
Please do.
Okay.
I'm not sick. I just got excited and swallowed my spit wrong.
I love humanness that BiPlus community bring to these things. It's just great, isn't it? Juniper, I'm interested to hear your thoughts as well. Yeah, just around, I guess, you know, mainstream health stuff. What's happening? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm a psychologist, so I do bits of education work. I recently did a lecturing gig at Deakin University for their counselling program, but I talked to health practitioners about like, all right, what's your education about queer stuff? So like, what was your education about queer stuff in high school? Mostly it was either non-existent, actively bad, maybe a bit of both. Rarely was it comprehensive and positive. What was their education in their bachelor's degree? If, you know, what was their undergrad like? Maybe a little bit more what was their education in their postgrad? So, you know, like top of the line degrees, medicine at Melbourne Uni or whatever it might be, is prestigious learning institutions. And often in terms of their queer inclusive practice, the answer is still none or very little, or sometimes actively the wrong thing that needs correcting. And so that's where we're coming from. Lots of folks are out there in the world, in the workforce, just with no real idea other than what they've kind of picked up just from general society and culture. So from pop culture, from their family, from religion. And it's actually pretty recent in sort of modern Australian culture that there has been like a majority or an increasing majority welcome and inclusion of queer folks. And even then, it really depends on how you look at it and on sort of like specific letters of the alphabet, I guess. And so that's what I kind of think about when we're talking about BI+ inclusion. Where are people starting from? Where would we like to get them to? I'd love to get them to, you know, every health practitioner knowing that definition of bisexuality being attraction to more than one, and also that there's like BI+ people use lots of different labels and oftentimes no label to describe being multigender attracted, and that people who are multigender attracted have similar or worse health outcomes to monosexual gay and lesbian folks. If I could get everyone to learn that, that'd be like schmicko amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love the solution-oriented approach too, because some of these conversations are really hard. Really, we're sort of asking for the bare minimum. But you're right, you know, not mainstreaming that within education and knowledge systems sort of gatekeeps that from practitioners feeling empowered and how to support our communities. So obviously that's why we exist there and why these resources are so important. And it's also, I think, about, you know, in terms of families and the future and visibility and things like that. I guess within my work supporting health services, it's also perhaps about the pictures even that are in the clinics, or, you know, for reproductive health, for example, what do families look like in that setting? You know, there's so many examples, I guess. Yeah, Jayde, I'm interested to hear your reflections perhaps around this health and wellbeing service delivery side of things.
Yeah, look. I'm really great with technology, as you can tell. Look, if I'm to reflect on the maturity of where we are in health and wellbeing, I think we have to say that we're still relatively immature, right? When people are aware, that's great, but it kind of stops at awareness. So they have maybe a baseline level of literacy and understanding about queer folk, rainbow folk, and then maybe if we're really lucky around what BI+ folk may or may not experience it, or multi-gender attracted people. So the literacy is low, and therefore the maturity of the health and wellbeing sector is low. So that's not the great thing. I think the positive thing, though, is, you know, there are wonderful reports like these coming out. There's an interest in learning, but we also know the literacy and maturity is low, and therefore we can act on it. And so I think kind of the solutions that we have to start looking for are really around, you know, higher ed. How do we support students being safe so they can study in these spaces, so then we can have more graduates and people who look like us, sound us like us, experience the things that we experience, becoming practitioners? How can we also make sure that our curriculums are reflective of, I guess, our experiences, so that we are supporting the allies within the spaces learn the right stuff? which then will lead to better health and wellbeing outcomes down the line. So for me, I'm hopeful in spite of the fact that we don't have very great health outcomes at the moment. I'm hopeful that if we can get into the right places and the right spaces, that we can see a generational shift. My other reflection on this, and it's from my own lived experiences, that because our health outcomes aren't particularly great, we do at times make a central part of our identity trauma. And because we make trauma a central part of our identity, when we experience these really poor and problematic stereotypes, it reinforces the trauma being central to our identity. And so I think there's a lot of work as well for us to do as BI+ folk, as well as those allies in the room, either in person or online, is how do we have a trauma-informed approach to building, strengthening and developing our communities, our spaces, and so that when we go into, say, a health setting that is not as inclusive of us as, to be honest, we really expect it should be, that we have the resilience to withstand it and move forward. So I'm going to stop there, but that would be my reflection.
No, I got this one working. Yeah, I just pressed the button a bunch of times. I just want to build on what you were saying, Jayde, because I think there's a great scale that kind of examines how our attitudes towards difference, and it starts with revulsion and it ends in nurture. And acceptance is not a positive in this scale. Acceptance is a negative because acceptance implies a sense of superiority and something that you can give and then take away. So like, oh, I accept everybody. Well, you still imply that they need your acceptance in the first place. And I think that was but I often think that we internalize that as BI+ people till we maybe reach tolerance or acceptance of our own sense of identity, and then that's kind of it, because there isn't really a lot of visibility of pride and celebration and discussing the things that we like about being bi and pan and omnisexual and polysexual and queer and all the ways that we get to interact with the world where gender has a different relationship, and we have a different relationship to gender than a lot of other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for those reflections. And I think it's really important just to, I guess, echo that, and also what Jayde was reflecting on as well. We do deserve to thrive, and we deserve celebration, and we deserve to access joy alongside the difficult things that we might face. And I think that that's really important. We have a joyful activity to close out the evening. So that's, really important to us, to lead to a shared space where we can talk about difficult things, but then also to share all the awesome stuff about being part of community as well. I'm interested to hear, Amber, your thoughts perhaps on... Hello, you're a little fuzzy, but I can hear you, so that's lovely. I'm wondering your thoughts, Amber, on the impact of gendered stereotypes on BI+ expression. So, what's the impact of gender on actually expressing bisexuality out in the world?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I think that, for so many BI+ people, gender and how they know themselves to be in the world can be really intrinsically linked with their bisexuality or their multigender attraction. And I say that in particular from my own lived experience as a genderqueer person. I can't separate that from my bisexuality. And I think that it means when people perceive us or try to understand BI+ communities, they don't always know how to make sense of us, and people rely back on those stereotypes that they have about who they think people should be or how they think people should act, because we're in a society that has really rigid stereotypes about what masculinity and femininity is, and the rest, who knows from a mainstream perspective, right? And those are stereotypes that have been reinforced through many, many years of colonization. And I think it's so essential that we recognize that because lots of Indigenous cultures and other cultures around the world have beautiful celebrations of all sorts of different genders. And so I guess what really comes to mind for me when I think about how gender impacts on bi+ people and how gender stereotypes impact on bi+ people is that it's central to our experiences. And I think that's something that's so powerful that comes through this report, because it brings those things to the forefront. And I do think that there's many, many more exciting things in the future for bi+ people to do and explore in those spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that reflection, Amber. And I think it also speaks to, well, what probably all of us have touched on already, where there is an assumption made often if people appear to be in a straight presenting relationship, and that essentially is a judgment on somebody else's gender identity that we actually can never tell from their appearance anyway. So it's sort of impossible, I guess, to talk about bisexuality and bi+ communities without also acknowledging the wonderful diverse genders that make up our community. And so that's really important to us, and, you know, being really explicitly inclusive of trans and gender diverse folk within MBN has always been a core founding value, of course. So that's awesome. Did anybody else want to speak to that particular point, just around gendered stereotypes?
I read a study recently, and this study was talking about how people have an awareness of bisexual stereotypes without those stereotypes specifically being communicated, because bisexual stereotypes are a reflection on our hang-ups about sex in general. And basically we have these ideas of so bisexual stereotyping, promiscuity, never being enough, like needing to kind of, jump the fence every now and again, or like, put on my flannel t-shirt, roll under the, start playing Annie DeFranco and take a jump over the hedge. She was bi, great. But I think that really reminded me that often people have ideas around bisexuality that are less to do with people talking about, you know, bisexual stereotypes, more just because they're things that become natural assumptions based on on the social narratives we have around sex and the shame that we kind of place on sex and relationships. And the way that we do assume that cis men and cis women can't be friends without there being romance, that, you know, and we do this from infancy, right? Like, oh, it's a little boy and a little girl, they're so cute, we're going to dress them up like they're a bride and groom. That's normal. That's fine. That's heterosexual culture. Like, you know, and so that when you apply that logic to bisexual people, it makes sense why the first bisexual or the big bisexual magazine was called Anything That Moves, because that was a stereotype, anything, you know, because if you apply this logic that anyone you talk to where there is the potential for you to have a socially accepted attraction to them, you will have that and you'll act on that, which I think talks about a culture of pretty severe repression and suppression. And so I think bisexuality is and being proud of bisexuality and understanding what it means to me meant I had to unpack a lot of understandings about what different kinds of attraction felt like. I couldn't rely on social scripts to be like, oh, I'm talking to, back when I still thought I was a woman, like I'm talking to this guy, we're both laughing, this is flirting, we're flirting now, because that's what this relationship could be. You know, and then when I'm talking to someone who's not a guy, just being like, okay, who's going to be, I've been socialized to respond. So who initiates? It's been 2 years. Come on, let's get this going. Every single ever, yeah. But there's a reason for, yeah. And so I think I found that very interesting, that people don't even really need to know about bisexuality to know bisexual stereotypes, because bisexual stereotypes are a reflection of the way that the society is shame and repression of sex and of relationships. Because if you can be friends with someone when you have the potential to feel attraction and not act on it, which bisexual people have to do, otherwise we would have no friends, then anyone should be able to do it. And a lot of the structure of patriarchy is built in the sense of, and the increasingly, loud anti-trans movement is based on this idea that, you know, men being a gender that can't control themselves. Well, bisexual men I know who are happy with themselves absolutely can, and bisexual people can. So our existence is a massive discord in a lot of the social narratives of society, which is why there is such a commitment to our erasure. And that which means that we all get to be rebels, which is a pretty fun thing because rebels get cool jackets.
Yeah, it's welcome to read my earrings. Yeah, no, thank you for that reflection. I think it's really important to just acknowledge that for LGBTQ people broadly and specifically BI+ people, our existence often gets reduced to sex and to sexual behaviour. And, you know, everybody's experience, whether you're part of community or not, part of the BI+ community or not, is so unique and diverse. Even, you know, if you're a cisgender and heterosexual person, everybody's experience is different. So we just like, I think, really can't get over queerness and what that means. But I also think that, you know, we do have more representation now. We have more media. We have more positive points of sides. Heartstopper. If none of you all watched Heartstopper yet, then that is mandatory homework, I'm sorry to say. Just keep an eye on it.
Can I jump in?
Sure.
With my bisexual jacket privilege, I've got my badges on. To add on to some of what we've been talking about, and talking actually about the intersection between gender and sexuality, specifically with our intimate partner violence report. Ruby and I had some pretty big and at times heated discussions with each other about what were we going to do about gender, because talking about gendered violence, especially in the sort of like women's driven feminist movement institutions of fighting gendered violence and reduction of misogynistic violence and preventing women being killed by their partners, we spoke about, well, I think we really need to strategically and specifically talk about bi women. And at the same time, we're two non-binary people leading a committee with like, you know, more than 50% non-binary and trans committee membership, and talking about like, well, part of our like broader aim is to go far beyond the gender binary. And even in our Berry Street one, we were talking to practitioners like, all right, so like, where does a bisexual man who is experiencing domestic violence, hypothetically, where does he go? And they really said, well, nowhere. He can't go anywhere. He can maybe go to Thorn Harbour Health, I guess. But
join the wait list.
Yeah, join the wait list. But look, we decided that for this report, it would be a kind of like seed starter step report to get in where folks in the domestic violence space are, which is gendered violence against women. And that genuinely is an incredibly important issue for broader bi community. And that there are ways in which the intersections of misogyny and biphobia are really specific in that space. And you can see that in the report in bi misogyny, especially around myths of promiscuity and that being used to denigrate, to dismiss, to devalue, whether it is in the context of a relationship and that being part of the abuse itself, accusations of cheating, dismissal, denial, or even like in the courtroom or by police in trying to give evidence or navigating those systems. And so gender, as much as I, as you know, like a non-binary trans woman, want to be talking about like beyond the binary and let's erase some of those lines, we also need to work with what are the dominant systems at play of the two genders and how that works with misogyny. And I think that's been a tricky balance to work with. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's such a nuanced area, and it's really difficult because, of course, BI+ focused research is already thin on the ground, right? And then, we're sort of trying to work with often fairly minimal data sets, and trying to draw out experience. And, I guess that's why it's exciting to think about the future and where we can go. And then also just reflect on the experience, to Jayde's point earlier, of our BI+ ancestors, and, think about that history and what we can draw on there, and that strength as well. But thank you for those reflections, everybody. I'm just aware of time as well. We'll make sure we have some time for questions before we move on to networking. Amber, I'm interested to hear from you, your thoughts on next steps for improving BI visibility.
I love that question. I think for me, a really essential part of where we need to go next is making sure that BI+ people are not just visible, but listened to. We're in the rooms, making the decisions, we're designing programs, we're contributing to policy, we're allocating funding, we're evaluating the programs. We're there in every bit of decision making and service provision. I think visibility is a really, really important starting point. I think visibility is not the end point. And so I would really love to see more conversations, particularly from folks who are not BI+, about what they can do to uplift and celebrate BI+ people, and make sure that we're in the room to be involved in decision making, because I think that's really where we see substantial shift. It's when we can see ourselves in those processes, in how things are designed and in how things are delivered. And I think we're on the precipice of some really exciting stuff around that, because of the people who've come before us and because of the people who are doing things now. So it's a good place to be in, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, it's sort of at the point now where it's not really acceptable not to do anything. Perhaps people aren't sure where to start, but again, it's about, elevating and showing allyship, even if it's within our own communities too. Sometimes we can be a bit picky on each other, and, there's no wrong place to start is always my viewpoint. Jayde, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on, I guess, to your point about lived experience as well. Like, how do we do visibility well and keep that trauma-informed approach?
Interesting. Big question. Look, I'm going to reflect on my living experience. And I think visibility, to Amber's point, is incredibly important. I'd like to believe we've started to become a lot more visible than we were maybe 10 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, maybe 60 years ago. But at the same point in time, I think about rural and regional folk. I think about my own living experience of going back into the closet every time I go back home. I think about my experiences as being in a straight presenting relationship and having a little human, and my experiences in the health service when I was having my little human. And when I reflect on those things, often what I come back to is that while we have significant and vast diversity in our BI+ communities, at times that diversity isn't always championed. I think we're doing a brilliant job, and MBN's doing a brilliant job. So I don't think it's not a personal reflection on where we're at, because we've come so far. But I think in order for us to continue to progress, we need to start looking beyond the metropolitan lens that we often have to BI+ folk, because BI+ folk will often escape the regions to experience what it's like to be bi. But how do we support BI+ folk age healthily? So when they go into their aged care facilities when they're 78 or 94, that they're not thrust back into the closet. And so I think a lot of the Bi Plus challenges we have are often at times unique, or they're compounded issues that LGBTIQ plus people face more broadly. And so for us, I think the challenge and the learning is, how do we take an intersectional strengths-based approach forward in our visibility advocacy? How do we become more audible Bi plus advocates? So talking about those who aren't in the room, and then actually how do we start tailoring experiences for the people who aren't necessarily comfortable to come to events? For me, it's an incredibly uncomfortable space to be at a Bi Plus event, and I'm outwardly bi. And it's because I don't feel like I fit. I don't feel like I fit in many spaces, but I'm in a straight presenting relationship. So for me, it's like, well, I'm not Bi plus enough to be bi. And I'm not straight enough to be straight. And so it's very messy. And I know a lot of you feel that, if not all of you feel that. But it's, how do we make the visibility meaningful so that the people can walk in the room and, yeah, be a bit anxious possibly, but actually want to stay, want to come back. And that's the challenge. For me, it's not how can I get in the room. I can get in the room because I've been asked to be on the panel. How can you keep me so I'm not so petrified of being in the space that someone will figure out that I don't belong here, that I bolt home after this and never come back, right? And maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that's the point, right? Is there's so many people who are bi who don't want to come into Bi plus spaces. And that to me, that is the biggest challenge for us and the biggest opportunity, because I'm sure the census data at some point is going to say that we're the largest population, if not now, soon. Yeah. Anyway, I'll get off my high horse. But I think, you know, as I said, I could talk to you about policy. I could talk about it. But actually, sometimes it's just really important to talk about your living experience, because what we all want to achieve is an empowered, a safer, a braver space, not just for ourselves, but people who are like us.
Points in there. It's hard to pick a succinct few. Most importantly, though, the Loomis Sexual Network has some wonderful little cards that say clear enough. So that's a good validation. In terms of rural and regional focus, though, I think, you know, we do bring a lot of assumptions to our lenses, you know, whether we're practitioners or community members or whatever the case may be. As someone who grew up in a small town in Queensland, I also left as quickly as possible, and maybe didn't have like a framework for what was happening for me, but, you know, definitely sort of out of the closet as a teenager and then went back in, and, you know, it's sort of a bit of a backwards and forwards situation. But it took a long time to feel safe and comfortable with community. And, you know, a lot of that I think will resonate what you were sharing, Jayde. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think we've come to the end of our panel now, but we may have some more time to answer questions. I saw a lot of people in the chat also just validating what people were saying, but we can't see those messages right now. So, yeah.
Questions,
comments, thoughts, feelings? Yeah. We'd love folks to share if they'd like.
Yeah. Roving microphone. I think at the back. Oh, no, just I can't hear you otherwise, sorry.
Yeah, thank you everyone for the time given, and yeah, especially Jayde for your high horse and your vulnerability. Really appreciate that. So my question is, you know, there's a lot of talk about, you know, rebels and queers and how do you feel navigating that world in the LGBT task force within the Victorian government, and I guess yeah. How does it feel like navigating those two worlds, having to walk that? Yeah.
I think BiPlus folk are very good at, if you've ever been in a drama club or any type of arty experience, really good at putting on different masks. I think, at least for me, I'm very good at putting on the professional Jayde mask or the advocate Jayde mask, or the at-home Jayde mask. And sometimes that can be very tiring, and I don't do it very well. But overall, and over time, I've been in this role for 4 years now, you develop a level of empathy for yourself and others. And I think COVID, as well as a number of things that have cropped up lately for our communities, has only reinforced to me that kindness is the best way forward. And so how I navigate this space, particularly when it's tense, particularly when there's a lot of lateral violence, particularly when people bring a lot of trauma to conversations, and we struggle to have uncomfortable conversations in our communities as well. My approach is always kindness and empathy. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. I'm sure there are others who on the panel as well who definitely have to walk this very tightrope on a regular and frequent basis, because as someone in the audience told me earlier today, all of us probably wear many hats. But yeah, my living and lived experience I will continue to treat with empathy and kindness to myself, because I'm not sure I'll get rid of my internalized biphobia, but I'm working really hard on it. And so just that self-kindness around, at times I will feel deep shame for who I am, but that's okay. And that's how I approach my day-to-day.
That was really beautiful.
Stop this, come on.
I just wanted to make a couple of comments if I can. Jayde is someone who has spent most of my life identifying as a lesbian. And now identify as bisexual. I also question I'm not bi enough, and I don't know that there is such a thing. And I think that being present and being here today is what it's all about, and being visible. And we know visibility is so important. So I guess just a thank you to everyone and for being here. Don't run away. And I just wanted to congratulate and thank Melbourne Bisexual Network for this work. I was really excited to come along tonight, and I think the guide and the research is really important, and it is part of the visibility work that needs to happen to combat in the broader society, but also in the lateral violence that happens. My declaration, I'm from Switchboard, and I was telling the Switchboard folks about this tonight, and I'll be taking it back there. And I guess in terms of family violence, Rainbow Door is a service that is for people in our community that are experiencing family violence. There's a number of multigender attracted and bi-identifying staff there. It's not to say that we are perfect, because we're not. No service is. But we're there, and we're going to continue to work on it, and I'll be taking these resources back, and we'll continue to work with government and with the community.
Heck yes. And I'm just going to...
Thanks for sharing.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to... I know I was talking about rebels and jackets, and I think it can be hard when you meet someone to know where they've come from. and to recognize that we meet people at a certain point in a journey, and that a lot of the bisexual journey is hovering on the edges of those spaces and not feeling like, or putting a foot in and then either being told or telling ourselves that we can't, it's not for us. And I found something, the kind of practical grounding measure was to get that was to read things about bisexual people and to read research and to see it as a part of myself that was worth investing in a bit, to actually understand. And I think research shows that bi+ people are the least likely in the sexual orientation area to feel like our orientation is important, as it is an important part of us. So again, you kind of hold it at a distance and it makes us feel uncomfortable. It feels cringy, I think, is the thing. Like it can feel embarrassing almost because we're not really. But I also think, no one should have to do a 5-year podcast and co-found an organization and do all that work. And that shouldn't be what it takes to feel comfortable in being bisexual. But I do think what helped with that is feeling comfortable in flux and to feel comfortable in recognizing that very few things about how we feel about other people are fixed and are quantifiable in terms of a ratio. Am I 60% this and 40% that? I was like, it's 40%. I got the maths right. Yeah. So, but I think that's also been really important to me but the thing that has helped me most with actually cultivating a sense of pride in being bi is talking to. Okay, it's been talking to other bi+ people and having those conversations and to see my experience reflected in them and theirs reflected in me, and to see our excitement build as we realize that we are sharing something that maybe we haven't talked about before, and that there are so many people like that. And that can be really hard too. Sorry. Oh dear.
Yeah, and then we might throw online if anyone's got some online.
I'm trying to form it into appropriate question because it might be a bit tangential to what you've done, or maybe I'm curious about if there were any informal insights on this matter. I think someone mentioned that the research for intimate partner violence was mostly metropolitan based. I'm really curious about the spatial arrangements, situations, impacts of all these interactions, right? I had a couple of things I'm trying to narrow it down. So I've seen in research, for example, that permeability for housing can be a way of tackling vulnerability in intimate partner violence. If people can see into your house, for example, from the street, you're less likely to get, violence in that space. But for there was one piece of research on lesbians that showed that they're uncomfortable with visibility from the street, and just sort of that there's clearly something going on there, but just sort of wondering if you counted in your research any discussions on I guess the physical impact of space on experiences and how that might differ. Yeah.
Juniper, do you want to grab that one, or Amber? You've done your.
Yeah, I can maybe talk a tiny bit about it. No, we didn't answer that question specifically, and I'm not aware of any work specifically on that. But here are a few things to throw at you, I guess. Bi+ people are more likely to be homeless and to experience homelessness. Bi+ people are more likely to experience various substance use issues and mental health issues, and all of these things. Bi+ people are more likely to be at low income and in poverty, and all of these intersecting factors are a result of dual discrimination, we think, is our kind of best guess. But all of these things shape the places and the ways in which we live, and shape the ways in which we might experience or perpetuate violence in our relationships, in our families, in our partnerships. So certainly in queer communities, how domestic violence operates is often hidden sometimes in different ways to in heterosexual relationships. That's partially because queer folks are often trying to keep the kind of view of we're just like you, we have good, perfect relationships. There's no reason to look here, mainstream. Don't worry about it. We're all like rainbows and sunshine and white picket fences, right? That was certainly the case during the marriage equality campaign. And it is part of what drives domestic violence underground and hidden and behind closed doors and stops people from speaking up because they're like, oh, I definitely don't want to call the police because they're going to be biphobic and queerphobic, maybe lesbophobic or transphobic. I'm not too sure about asking for help because what if the psychologist or social worker is biphobic? But also, what if it gets out? What if it gets out amongst my community that my relationship is got this bad stuff in it? And that what if people say, well, perhaps that's because they're bisexual?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are a couple of things, but I'll throw it over to Amber, an incredible expert in this area.
I've got some stuff to add to that, and I should say that I'm answering this from the lens of some stuff that's come up in a thesis that I'm doing with ARCHS at La Trobe about bi+ people's experiences of domestic, family, and sexual violence. And everything that Juniper has said are the types of things that I think come up in this space for bi+ people, and those compounding experiences, whether it's homelessness, whether it's about income, all of those things impact on whether or not people are able to seek support if they want it. Many people do indeed want it. We hear that a lot. But I think the other thing that really stands out to me from what I've learned in sitting with people's stories is that bi+ people can experience violence in so many different areas of their life over and over again. So the types of stories that I have heard with people that I've been so honored that people have trusted me with sharing are that they may have experienced family violence. They may have left their home and experienced homelessness because of biphobia, because of transphobia, because of homophobia. And later in life, then experience violence in their relationships. And sometimes they don't recognize that what they've experienced is actually violence until talking with friends, or maybe years later when they're processing what they've experienced. And so I guess when I'm thinking about what you've asked about space, I'm thinking about it not just in terms of physical space, but time and space as well. And I think that that's something for us to consider too. It's a really great question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that structural discrimination and the impact of that over time, within health services, we talk about the minority stress model, but then we sort of struggle, I think, to reconcile the actual impacts of what that means over time. It is complex, and we all have a part to play in undoing that within, either our personal lives or perhaps our roles, or, in some small way contributing to combating that. I guess, repeated discrimination over time in various forms. And just also reflecting on, I guess, my time in frontline family violence services, often for LGBTQ folks and for bi+ women in particular who are in relationships experiencing family violence, they would often call in anonymously for that exact reason, to have some sort of protection, I guess, around judgment and whatnot. And also because from a mandatory reporting perspective, that can bring up a whole range of complexity as well. So a lot of intersecting difficulties there for folks in experiencing those situations. We are over time, unfortunately. We are going to stick around though, so we can chat. I might just throw to wonderful Gabi to conclude our session and thank our divine panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I just wanted to check that there was no one in the chat online who had any questions at all. I haven't seen any come through in the chat, but we haven't forgotten that you're all sharing this space with us. So thank you very much, everyone who's logged in. I hope that you've all gotten something valuable from tonight. I thank you all for joining us. We're really, really proud of the work that we've done, and we're really grateful that you could all be here to help us launch these two really important projects. We hope to see their impact in our community as time goes on. And we hope to see all of you back with us at future events. If you identify as any kind of multigender attracted, I'm just going to reiterate, you are bi enough, you are queer enough, you belong in this space, and we're very happy to have you here with us. And thank you as well to all our allies who continue to support us as well. So that's it for the formalities. We do have some catering here to help feed all our hungry bellies, and it's just a time for us to network and mingle and enjoy the rest of the night. Sorry. Yes, one last bit of housekeeping. We have a fun little project you can participate in if you want. We've got some post-it notes, and you can just pin something up on the board what your favourite thing about being bi+ is. And if you're online, you can just type something into the chat, your favourite thing about being part of this community. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.